Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Art Like Everything Else, the podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Mo, and this week we're going to be talking about rage, but not rage in just any specific kind of way, but about like who's allowed to feel rage. And I'm going to use two different works of art to talk about just that. So let's get started. So this week we're going to be switching it up again, just because I think this order is going to be a bit better for the discussion. So if you've been listening to me for a while now, usually I try to start with the oldest piece of media first, and then I go to the newest media. But this time I'm going to start with what would of the two pieces I'm going to be talking about, what would be considered the youngest of the two pieces. So, the first work of art I'm going to be using to kind of talk about this rage and who gets to be angry is actually going to be the film The Help. So, this film was considered a drama slash comedy, and it was released in 2011. So, the movie starred Viola Davis, Octavia Spencer, Cicely Tyson, and it even had Emma Stone in it, and there was a bunch of other cool people also in the movie. So definitely feel free to check out the movie if you heard any of these names that you might have liked. Now I'm going to talk about some parts of the movie, but like I always try to do, um, spoiler. I'm gonna be as spoiler free as possible. So in case you haven't seen the movie, you are allowed to go watch, and like there's something you can get out of watching the film. But on the off chance that you have seen the movie or you haven't seen the movie and you still want to watch this episode without pausing, watching the movie and coming back, I am not going to be talking about like the movie beat by beat. I'm just going to talk about maybe a few different scenes and a few of our characters and like the relationships they have with some of these other characters, because those relationships are going to be very, very important into today's discussion. So, with that being said, I'm going to hop right into the discussion. So, if you want to pause, here's your time. Alrighty, so in the movie The Help, we are following Viola Davis's character, Aibileen, who is a maid back in I believe this is the 1950s? 1960s. My apologies. So it's actually the 1960s. And so during this time, of course, if you're not from the States and you're listening to this podcast, or if you are from the States and maybe you're just really ignorant, or maybe you just don't know, there was a lot of segregation and a lot of racism happening back in the 1960s. And so during this time, a lot of black women, especially, were forced to work as maids or as the help in the homes of white people, hence the title. And so in these homes, you kind of saw how they were treated almost as second class citizens. Like there's one character I'm going to be talking about in particular who goes by the name of Minnie Jackson. And so for her arc in the movie, there's a few things that's kind of going on with her. One of them I'm going to kind of not talk about, just so that if you do want to go watch the movie, there's something new you can kind of discover about her character. But outside of that, I do want to talk about how in this movie, Minnie, you can see how the woman she works for treats her like a second class citizen. So, spoiler warning, but actual, like, verbatim scene from the movie. But there's a scene in the movie where it is quite literally pouring down rain, thundering and lightning outside. And the owner of the house that Minnie is working in does not let her use the bathroom inside of the house. She tells Minnie that she needs to leave the house to go to an outside bathroom, like in this pouring down rain and everything. And we can see it's because she believes that black people have carried different diseases than white people. And so there's this whole like initiative she's even trying to get out, that about trying to make it more legal to treat black people further as second class citizens. But so like with Minnie's character, we see her being treated like trash despite bending over backwards to meet the needs of the family that she's working for. And you can see that she's not allowed to, like, what in the movie they kind of refer to as sass mouthing, but like talk back or like kind of stand up for themselves, because like of course in the 1960s doing so would have, especially for a black person to do that to a white person, it would have been considered illegal or a crime or made to be a crime. And it's not even like, I guess not ironic, but the character that this Minnie used to work for in the movie actually does talk about, in the movie she talks about like she will create a crime and call the police on a maid because the maid is doing did something that she didn't like. And so she is more than okay with ruining the lives of the people who work for her just because she believes she's better than them. And you see the ways in which like this woman treats Minnie, treats the other maids, and treats all of the other people working for her, and you see how she quite literally belittles them, and they are not allowed to emote or to be angry in that moment. And that is something that I really want to talk about. All right, so our next work of art that I'm going to use to kind of add to today's discussion is actually going to be a piece of performance art. Now, I'm kind of just going to talk about the general topic of this particular performance art, but if you'd like to learn more, there's documentaries, there's all kinds of like actual legit like ways to kind of see people discussing the specific performance art in general. So let me give you a bit of background so you know what to look for. So the performance art that I'm going to be talking about today is called Rhythm Zero. So this is a performance art by the Serbian artist Marina Abramović. And in this performance art, you may have seen like pictures or reference to it online. Like this performance piece happened in back in 1974, and so performance art Rhythm Zero, Marina actually she sat still in a singular location, and she remained passive for 6 hours. And during these 6 hours, she allowed the audience or whoever was um, watching or came across her performance, they had the ability to do whatever they wanted with her. So she left out, I believe it was 72 items. So there was chains, nails, hairpins, there was a brush, bandages, um, white paper. It was a whole slew of things left on this table and given and like they were given permission to do whatever it was that they wanted with her. And in Marina's actually she does a TED talk where she's talking briefly about this particular experiment, and like you can also see it a bit in the documentary, where like in the beginning people were not so cruel, but towards the later half of like the duration of this performance, you saw people get more and more cruel, and like a lot of violence kind of like just started to almost like expound and get bigger and bigger and more like dangerous as she was out there. And the part of this that I think is going to be really, really important for today's conversation is actually at the very, very end of this particular performance. After Marina had experienced all that she had experienced for that duration of that 6 hours where she sat unmoving and let people do whatever it was that they wanted to do to her. It People did not get afraid of consequences until she moved again. And it was at the very, very end of this performance where when the 6 hours was up, she noted that people sort of tried to get away from her as soon as possible. And that is kind of what I want to use to talk about in today's conversation. So, yeah, today's conversation: who gets to be angry? Who gets to be mad? Rage and art. I really wanted to talk about this particular topic because it's something that really, really frustrates me. It's something I see often, especially because oftentimes, kind of like how it showed up in The Help, The people who are not allowed to be angry, the people who are not allowed to show or emote their feelings to the circumstances that they're actually going through, is often those who are considered to be a bit more marginalized or of like a lesser standard. I see it all the time in like K dramas. I see it all the time in movies. I see it all the time in all types of art. I see it all the time in life where the minute you, as somebody who's on the receiving end of violence, who's on the receiving end of harm, the minute you're angry and you show that anger, you're automatically considered to be almost equally, if not more wrong than those who are the ones who are committing said violence. Because we see in the movie The Help, that even them speaking out about like the maids in the movie, even them speaking out about the harsh treatments that they might have experienced, seeing them being treated so inhumanely, especially when it comes to Minnie, it's like pretty much forbidden essentially for her to have like shown anger towards the person who's causing her the most harm. And like especially considering just being in the 1960s in general, Black people then were just like, they were not granted the same space to be angry about their circumstances because they just were not. They were not allowed to be angry. They were not allowed to be rageful and to show feelings or show any sort of like discontent with the circumstances at hand, because it makes those who are perpetuating, if I can speak, it would make those who are perpetuating that harm uncomfortable. And people who perpetuate harm don't want to have to think about their actions. Oftentimes, some people don't care that they're causing harm. They're happy to cause harm. But sometimes there are people who are knowingly perpetuating harm, but because they're doing it under the guise of rules or established like communications or established like um expectations, they try to ignore the act that they're actually kind of causing harm, and that they're perpetuating this harm, and that they are in fact, by continuing to perpetuate said harm and it by endorsing the harm that's happening. There are people who are uncomfortable when those who are more marginalized, so whether that be disabled people, talking about how it is absolutely unfair that the world is acting like COVID is no longer a thing, or if it's people of color kind of having to come to terms with, hey, not everyone sees me as human, or women also kind of having to come to terms with world power that be, that see me as subhuman, that see me as less than human. And I'm not allowed to be angry about that. I'm not allowed to express frustration about that. And it's mind boggling. It's mind boggling and it's unfair. And you can see why it's unfair, because you know that these people are uncomfortable when it comes to acknowledging the reality of what it is that is happening. Just kind of like how in Rhythm Zero, it was at the very end of that performance that once Marina was able to walk again, once she was able to interact and move around again, everyone scattered. Everyone wanted to get away as soon as possible, even though they were there actively inflicting that harm when they thought they could get away with it. Like, it's things like this. It's like knowing that you are kind of existing in a world that is okay with causing you harm, and that is okay with inflicting as much harm as possible, even if it's not on you, but on people who you might be in community with. That is always probably like the most frustrating, because you're not allowed to be angry about that. You're not allowed to be upset that people you care about, that people you respect, are being made to feel like they are less than human, are being made to feel like their emotions, that their feelings, that their lives, their realities do not matter in the grand scheme of things, because there are other people who want to feel superior. There are other people who want to feel better than them. And it's not fair. It's frustrating. It's so frustrating. But if you show that anger, if you speak up, if you react, you're seen as being the perpetrator of any violence going forward. If you remember, if you listened to the podcast episode a couple weeks ago when we were talking about harm, when like harm happens, so often the people who are perpetuating that harm might not actually care, or they're very aware of the harm they're perpetuating. Like there are those who do not, who perpetuate harm and they don't know they are perpetuating harm. They learn, they do better. But there are others who who absolutely know that they're perpetuating harm, but they don't care because if they perpetuate harm to one group of people, they do not feel like that harm will fall onto them. And that's unfair. And it's quite a bit selfish as well. Like annoyingly selfish, at least to me. Um, because who are you to decide who gets to be harmed and who doesn't get to be harmed? I say all that to say everybody should be angry. Like if you are living in the world we are living in now, a world where there are several genocides happening all over the world, like as we speak, a world where people are being kidnapped and taken to different countries that they're not even from, as we speak, in a world where just because of the way you were born, you are being treated as less than human and not allowed to exist how you see fit as we speak. All of these things are happening as we speak. You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to want to see something different. And it is because so often society is trying to placate us. They're trying to get us to ignore all of the stuff that is happening around us, all of the stuff that is happening as we speak, that they want you to not be angry. They're trying to placate you with all of these small little things, but that shouldn't be enough. And it won't be enough. And it can't be enough. It quite literally can't be enough. Like there's so much work that has to be done. And the very first step in a lot of this work that needs to be done is actively being angry. To not be passive in this life, to not be passive and allow things to happen. There are several things that can be done when it comes to making a difference in the world. And it does not have to be super duper grandiose, but you can start small and you can make a difference. And that starts with letting that anger, letting that rage, or even if it's like despair, letting that fuel you to be like, I can't let this keep happening. There has to be something I can do. And figuring out what that is and what you can do within your power and doing that thing. Because we can't give up on the world that is meant for us. I refuse for us to have to give up on a world that is quite literally meant for us. Because there are certain people who are like, well, I think you should be treated less than human, so I'm going to treat you less than human, and we roll over and let that happen. No. They want us to not feel like we have any power or feel like we have any say in how things are going. And so that's why they want us to remain passive, and they're hoping we remain passive. But there's work that can be done. There are people who need our support, and these are people we should be supporting. And so maybe being angry, maybe actually allowing ourselves to feel the full range of these human emotions that we have, too, can be an art. An art like everything else. Alrighty, and last but certainly not least is this week's All Moment. So for those who are new to the podcast, All Moment is just a art of the week that. So it's art of the week. So art that made me think for the week, art that's on my mind for the week, art that's I'm thinking it's just really, really cool and I want to talk about. It's just that's all that this segment really is. I'm just talking about a piece of art. Sometimes it relates to the topic of the episode, sometimes it doesn't. Either way, I think it's cool. So this week, the art that made me think actually is I'm not trying to be cocky or anything, but my podcast episode from the last episode upload, where I was talking about harm. So I've been trying to catch up at least on the Devil Judge, and it kind of just got me thinking about how just in general, like media in general, kind of shows how often like those who are marginalized often are not allowed to feel their feelings or are told that like their rage is what's the word I'm looking for? Unnecessary. Like there's like people who are marginalized are just expected to kind of roll over and accept the cards that they're dealt with, and it's really really frustrating. And that's why I kind of was wanted to talk about this particular topic in general, um, because I think that's something that's actually really really cool about art. Um, is that like art itself can often be the fuel for conversations that need to be had. Like art is an extension of life. So of course there are lots of things that kind of occur in art that may make you think or may make you want to explore some ideas or like some the whys of certain behaviors and whatnot. And I think that's really, really cool. And that's just I why I wanted to explore it. Like the whole entire reason I even like made this podcast is because art means so much to me. I really like art. I really like reading. I like listening to music. I like um looking going to museums, going to performances and like kind of just being out and about and recognizing all the ways in which people make life beautiful. And I think that's an art. And there's so much art and creativity that goes into living. And so I wanted to kind of talk about those things and lots of those conversations that those things will inspire people to either talk about, conversate about, or just like experience. Because a lot of the times, especially with my episodes, with whatever I'm watching, the topic, if I mention it or bring it up during a particular like um episode, it's because it kind of inspired like that topic of that episode when I was watching that thing, it inspired me to like learn more about that topic. Or I kind of was thinking about something and I was just like, oh, I wonder if there's any media that kind of can help me to understand this a bit, because I am a visual learner, like seeing things and like being able to kind of vicariously experience these things helps me be able to learn and kind of get to know a lot of the things that are happening. And I think it's really really cool. I watch a lot of stuff. And even like now, even though I've been watching mainly like video gameplays and whatnot, I'm learning a lot from these video games. I'm learning a lot from the characters and how they navigate and how they choose to interact with their world and like their values and the types of questions that kind of come up for me with those. I just think it's all pretty pretty cool. And so yeah, I'm a big fan of art. I love art. I think it's cool. And I thank you all for being here. If you are not following, please follow, like, subscribe, comment below your favorite piece of art or a piece of art that means a lot to you. I'd love to check it out, or I'd just love to get to know a little bit about those who are watching me through your art. And so, yeah, thank you for listening. Also, feel free to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. I'm going to have the handles on the screen. So if you want to follow my personal, that's the Lovely Infinite. The word lovely has no vowels, so the O and the E are gone. So it's LVLY. And then if you'd like to follow the channel or just my personal page, well, not personal, but like my kind of podcast and all of the other cool things I'm going to be doing. If you'd like to follow that, feel free to follow those accounts on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at Art Like Studios. That's also on screen. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.